My name's Colin Marshall. This is the Marketplace of Ideas. This week on the Marketplace of Ideas, a conversation with urban theorist Richard Florida, author of Who's Your City? How the creative economy is making where to live the most important decision of your life.
Just like economists and business people can give you economic and career advice, just like psychologists will help, and they have outlets to do this, and distill from studies to give you advice on how to organize your life psychologically and pick a better partner and be happier. And there are lots of books now, and maybe that was it. There's just a lot of books now on the psychological happiness. I said, well, it makes perfect sense that someone who works in geography and urbanism and urban planning and cities could give you advice, and not just random advice, fact-based advice based on evidence and trends that could give a person advice on how important it is to pick the right place that fits you to live.
Listen to any Marketplace of Ideas interview anytime on our online archive on the website colinmarshallradio.com, or download them from iTunes. Open up iTunes and search for the Marketplace of Ideas. And there you can also subscribe and get it every single week automatically.
That's what I've been telling a lot of people, a lot of record promoters, and a lot of artists. I mean, it's like, it's something, it's music that you got to touch and feel, you know what I'm saying?
Richard Florida is the professor of business and creativity and head of the Prosperity Institute at the Rodman School of Business at the University of Toronto. Perhaps he's best known as the author of The Rise of the Creative Class. His new book is Who's Your City? How the Creative Economy is Making Where to Live the Most Important Decision of Your Life. Richard, welcome to the program.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
The first thing I want to start off with, because there's so many cool ideas in this book and there's limited time, I want to get into an idea you're actually against, and that is that globalization has made distance irrelevant. It means you can do your high-tech job off in the mountains somewhere as long as you have an internet connection. How did you come to be against that?
Well, it's pretty clear that globalization does exist. Companies are outsourcing and offshoring their work, moving factories to India and China, but one of the things we found is that in this age of technology and innovation, place really matters. And we took a look and compiled data on what we call the mega regions. And we calculated that there are 191 countries in the world, but there's only 40 mega regions. These 40 mega regions, places like the Boston, Washington, New York corridor, Southern California, for example, the area that runs from Chicago to Pittsburgh, Greater Tokyo, and Greater London, they account for about a fifth of the world, actually less than a fifth of the world's population, about 18%. But they produce two-thirds of the entire world's economic output and almost 90%, 9 in 10 of the world's innovations. So what we're finding is that even though place is supposed to be less relevant, people are packing themselves and into these urban centers and these mega regions, which are really the centers of innovation and economic growth in the world today.
What did you find? What data did you find where you were seeing, hey, there are bigger things than cities here? How did you discover these mega regions?
Well, I read and was very influenced by Tom Friedman's book, The World is Flat. So what we tried to do was just look at some data that would let us understand the real organization of the world economy. So that data doesn't exist. The World Bank doesn't have it. The UN doesn't have it. The U.S. government doesn't have it. How could we create it? Working with a group of really, really smart and clever people, we took the satellite images of the world at night, those light, where the lights are all lit up. And if you're in a plane flying at night, you can see it. We actually used that light data to construct the measures of economic output and of innovation. And lo and behold, when you plot this out, if we had a picture, the world isn't flat at all. There are these huge, huge, huge peaks of economic activity, again, in Southern California, the East Coast corridor, Southern Florida, Greater Tokyo, Greater London, Shanghai, and China, and it literally, it looks like these light-emitting mountains coming out of the land. So what we found is that place is really important, and the world isn't flat at all. It's really very spiky.
What does the existence of these mega regions mean to? And now I should say that what do they mean to the creative class? And what is the creative class while we're at it, just to define that for those who haven't read the first book?
Well, I think what it means is that why I wrote Who's Your City, my new book, is really to make people aware of the trade-offs they're going through. 40 million people move in America each year. 15 million of us make a big move. We move between counties, between states, or we move to a new country. And most of us do it. Maybe about a fifth of us follow a new job. Other people follow a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Other people are looking, to find themselves. But what this book says is you have to be aware of the trade-offs. And increasingly, in many, many, many careers, those careers can be best pursued inside these mega regions and inside particular mega regions. I mean, if you're in Southern California, you have to be there if you want to be in acting and entertainment. But if you want to be in technology, you had best be in the San Francisco Bay Area. If you want to be in investment banking, you have to be in Greater New York or in London. So what the book is saying is you need to be aware of this. You need to be aware of mega regions, and you need to balance the trade-offs because, moving for a career means you leave behind family and friends. It may mean that you pick a region that's not in line with your lifestyle habits and what your hobbies and recreational interests are. So that's the reason I wrote this book, to kind of give people a sense of the structure and the trade-offs they need to make in picking a place to live.
Is what you call the creative class, are they the hardest hit by this phenomenon of mega regions? Are they the ones who will be moving around the most because there are places where they need to go to pursue their creative class careers?
I think what we're seeing in the United States is a sorting or a segmentation of people, and one, that's by what the work they do. So investment bankers live in one place, actors live in another place, musicians live in a third place, designers live in a fourth place. But I actually think the real class demarcation in our society is increasingly those who are mobile and those who are not, and that really worries me. Because it means that, the people who are mobile are the ones able to pick up on the economic opportunity. But if you're not mobile, if you need to stay close to family or friends, or you don't have the resources to move, you can fall further and further and further behind. I think from a city point of view, less from a personal point of view, but from a city point of view, the cities and regions that are going to be the ones that are winning are the ones that are attracting the highly mobile members of the creative class who are moving to opportunity, have high levels of education, have resources, work in the arts, design, information, biotech, science, innovation, entrepreneurship. But I think from an individual point of view, I wanted to point out to every single American that increasingly economic mobility, unless you're fortunate enough to be born right in the middle of one of the great mega regions, economic mobility is going to increasingly turn on your ability to geographically move as well.
And with this issue of rootedness versus mobility, what does this country's inclination toward home ownership, what does that mean? What does that do to this? Because if you're so driven to own a home, doesn't that sort of stop you from moving around like you would need to take advantage of this new economy?
Well, I think there's no doubt that home ownership in the United States was a fantastic thing for people. I mean, my dad, working class guy with an 8th grade education, bought a home. We lived in it for our entire lives. I mean, from when I was 2 years old till the day I left home to go to college. And my parents both passed away in that house, so they lived in there for their entire adult life. I mean, it was a way to stimulate the industrial economy. People bought homes, they bought cars, they put a lot of gas in the cars, they bought television sets, they bought washer dryers, they bought hot water heaters, they bought dishwashers, they bought radios. They filled those things with the kinds of industrial products that drove the American economy. But now, in this highly mobile, highly flexible, idea-driven, creative economy, some people can make a killing out of buying and selling homes if they happen to be in the hot market, in the center of that market. But lots of other people who are in markets that are declining are completely stuck. Right now, with the credit crunch and the real estate problems, foreclosure crisis, they're underwater in their homes. There's no buyers for them, and they can't move. So we've come to the point that we have to really, really, really think about this. If we want our population to be able to move to economic opportunity, but they're stuck in homes in particular jurisdictions, that may work against our idea-driven economy. It also may work against those individuals. So my own thought is that we have to, as a society, we have to give this some thought. If I was going to advise a young person, I would tell them, do not buy a house. Unless you have the money to be able to afford that house, if you need to move, don't buy one. Because, in this increasingly idea-driven economy, you're going to have to move around. And in point of fact, houses, we bought into the mythology that they're great investments, but they're not. They're basically shelter. They go up and down and all around. So if I had to advise a young person, I'd say keep yourself mobile. An older person with a family, if you can find the right rental unit, that's great. If not, just find something you can afford and find something in a place that you can sell it if you need to. Or if you have to move, you can keep affording it and renting it out, because if not, you can really penalize your career and your family.
Now, this book, it's a highly research-based book. I mean, you've observed creative class people and others moving toward the mega regions where they're going to be best served. How much is it that you've seen that, and how much would you say what your goal was to tell people that they should be doing that? Because, of course, it's kind of a book of advice as well.
We have no shortage of advice, some of it good, some of it bad, but a lot of it reasoned about what you should do for a living. People publish career guides. They understand what occupations and job categories are growing. And, young people pick their college majors accordingly, and their career orientation. We have lots of advice on this second decision, big decision, is kind of, who you're going to marry, who you're going to take as a life partner, how you need to find that person, how they should complement you, what you should do, how to make it work. And what I found is there's this third big decision. If the what we do is number one and who we pick is number two, there's this where decision that's number three. And, I've been researching this subject of geography and location and place and cities for the better part of 2 decades. And so it dawned on me one day that people needed advice for all the reasons we just talked about. Picking a place when you're young, whether or not you should buy a home, what kind of community to live in. So I wanted to write a book that gave people that advice. And so that's the primary purpose of this book, is in a fact-based way, based on hundreds of studies, decades of research, to give people something that they can actually look at this and understand it. Not just real estate developers, mayors, economic developers, but the millions upon millions of Americans and people around the world who move every year. They had some advice. And my point is, it's not that we should all move to the same city. It's not all that San Francisco or L.A. or Santa Barbara or New York or London or Chicago are the best city. It's how do you find the best community, city, suburb, rural area for you? And how do you actually go about making that choice? That's the real point of this book. There's no one best community. There's only the best community for you. And what I found is when people get that right, they're extraordinarily happy. And when people get that wrong, they're not happy at all. It's just like, when your job doesn't fit you, you're miserable. But when you have a job you love, you're happy. When you're in a bad relationship, boy, life stinks. But when you're in a great relationship, your joy and happiness improves. The same thing. When you find that place that fits you, what we found is people get a whole lot more fulfillment and happiness and well-being in their lives.
It sounds to me, now correct me if I'm wrong, but reading this book, the decision of where to live, that's not just of the 3 most important decisions. That's number 1, because it's going to not determine, but it's going to give you your options for those other 2 big decisions, correct?
I certainly think, if we're talking about the 3 big moves, when you're graduating college, I actually think where you choose to live after college is more important than where you choose to go to college, and certainly is going to have a big effect on your job market. I mean, if you want to do certain kinds of things, you have to be in certain kind of job markets, but you don't want to go to a place where you just have one job offer. You want to go to a place with a thriving job market. Similarly, you have to go to a place that has an eligible pool of people that you might make friends with and go out on dates with. If you go out into a place where there's no young people, or where the odds are stacked badly against you, you're not going to have as great a chance to meet and find that special someone. So I think at that stage, where if I have to advise college graduates, I would say number 1, figure out where you want to live and how that affects your job market and your lifestyle and ability to meet people and make friends and date. The second big decision, when you have kids, not when you get married, but when they're kids who are of school age. Boy, oh boy, I can't think of anything more important than where your kids are going to go to school and the kind of environment they're going to grow up in and who they're going to have for friends, and also how your job market is going to be, how the economic opportunity is going to be, how your spouse is faring, the kind of people you meet. So it seems to me then again, the place you choose to live is critical. And then finally, and I think even more importantly, when you're an empty nester and your kids are gone, boy, oh boy, then you have a lot of locational flexibility. You can almost kind of, in a way, discount job and career, discount kind of economics to some degree, and find a place that really, really fits your lifestyle interests. And that your kids and your family will want to come visit you if you live there. Be excited to come visit mom and dad. So I think at each of those 3 stages of your life, it's at least as important as the other 2 decisions. The where is at least as important as the what and the who. And it seems to me that increasingly it's maybe even more important, and certainly for those young people starting out, it is by far the most, in my view, by far the most important decision they're going to make.
And even job market aside, there's another piece of research that I really wanted to be sure to talk about, and that is in the book when you cover cities and personality types. You actually map those, and I thought it was so cool. Just what were those personality types, and where did they kind of cluster?
Well, for most of my career, I've been a kind of run-of-the-mill kind of economist economic geographer, studying where jobs are, how economic opportunity happens, why innovations cluster in places like Silicon Valley. And I was unaware of the psychology and the personality factors. So over the past several years, I've delved into that because I got a hunch that it was important. And what we did was, working with a young psychologist at Cambridge University, a guy named Jason Renfro, we got data on personality types. Hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people complete these surveys. There are 5 personality types, according to psychologists: agreeable people, conscientious people, extroverts, neurotics, and open to experience people. And what we found is quite surprisingly that these personality types cluster, particularly open to experience type people, who are the ones who are innovative, likely to be creative, likely to form new businesses, likely to try new things, likely to try new products, likely to be involved in extreme sports, also tend to be introverted, a little bit disagreeable. Those kinds of people are the ones that are most likely to move. And if you look at the map, they're the ones that are spread out in the New Yorks, the Bostons, the San Franciscos, the LAs. And it doesn't surprise me then why those cities tend to be very innovative and creative, if you will, because they're the ones that over time have attracted a lot of these open to experience personalities. But point of fact is that every region and every community tends to have its own personality, and from a personal point of view, it's very important that you think about this, because if you're a very conscientious person and you're around a bunch of open to experience people, you're going to go nuts. If you're an introvert and you're stuck in an area with all the extroverts, you're going to go batty. So, and we found this, actually, finding a place that fits your personality type has a lot of effect on your own personal psychological happiness. So at least it's something to keep in mind.
I personally I consider myself to be maybe addicted to getting new experiences, and I really love LA. So I was looking at this map and thinking, man, he's got my number.
LA is a very good place for people who are open to experience. Maybe not the best place for conscientious or agreeable people. There may be other places, but the other thing that was funny is we found tons of extroverts in Chicago, and very interestingly, while LA has a lot of professions related to open to experience, a lot of creative people, entertainers, designers, a ton of musicians, visual artists. Chicago is like the center of the universe for salespeople. So, at some level, the occupational stuff, the job markets reflect. I'm not saying it's anyone's really kind of done this in a formal way, but yeah, the job structures of the places really do, at some level, reflect their personalities.
I've also got to say that I loved how the neurotic personality was just huge right up in the New York region, and I was thinking of all those Woody Allen movies when I saw that. I guess it's really, there's something to this, I don't want to say the stereotype, but just the ideas people have about what kind of person lives in what kind of a city. You validate a few of them with that research.
Yeah, we've tried to. We've tried to really push on all of these variables. And we know that in the past, very few people might have asserted this, that neurotics live in New York. Or, experiential people, creative people live in Greenwich Village or LA. But no one's ever studied it. They've just said it. So one of the things we want to do is try to probe this. The other thing we did a big survey with the Gallup organization, 28,000 people, to really look at how the place you live affects your happiness. And what we found is, just like the who, what, and the where, what you do is a really big effect on your happiness. Who you marry and, the state of your social life, your social relationships, how close you are to family and friends is a big effect on your happiness. But so does the place you live. And there are certain factors about places that really, really, really tend to make us happy. And some of them are obvious. We're happier when we live in a safe city. We're happier when we live in a community with a good school system if we have kids. We're happier if we live in a place that has a great mayor and leadership that gets it, so to speak. But we're also happier, this research finds, in a community that's open to diversity. That whether we're rich or poor, black, white, Hispanic, Latino, or Asian, we're happier in a place that's open to all various kinds of groups. So being open to different kinds of people really affects everybody's happiness, makes most people happier. And then finally, the thing that most affects our happiness or our psychological well-being in a place is how kind of beautiful it is. If it has great trees and open space and parks and preserve the architecture and its business district is kind of lovely. And, a lot of urbanists say that's all, ridiculous. What only matters is that you have a great crime rate and you keep the crime low and the pipes work and the sewers work and electric service is good. But in fact, what we found is more important to that, people's happiness, is actually the physical nature of the place, the quality of the place itself. So It's not silly at all, and you know it. When you're in a place that's physically attractive, you kind of feel more upbeat. You feel more energized, and that's not just rich people or yuppies. That's everybody, from poor people, low-income people, people across economic groups, education levels, all races, ethnicities, sexual orientations. When people are in a place that has this quality of place, has this really, really extraordinary quality, they're a lot happier. So that's something I tell people to keep an eye on. The look and feel of the place, its quality is really important to how happy you're going to be there.
And that idea seems intuitive, but a lot of this is being taken as surprising information. And why haven't these hypotheses like, the aesthetics of a place will make someone who lives there happier? Why haven't those been seriously studied before you were doing it?
That's a really good question. I think that there are environmental psychologists who have studied things like, at a very micro level, having trees nearby, does it affect your psychology? Being in a place that has the right kind of organization of park benches and, nice environment around it, I think that's been studied at a very micro level. For a long, long time, no one's been able to or had the inclination to do a very large-scale survey. So I think what this work is saying is when you look at a cross-section of 28,000 Americans in a Gallup poll, and you look at all the dimensions simultaneously, not just the effect of the local environment, but the effect of the local environment, crime and safety, leadership, and all these other factors, the environmental ones stand out. So I think that goes a little further, and it puts it into context. The other thing is, although I think the field I work in, urban planning and geography, is the greatest field in the world, I think it has done two things. One, it's very esoteric. It talks to academia, it talks to other scholars, it does powerful studies, and that's great, and so does economics and sociology and psychology. But it's taken its customer base, if you will, as mayors and civic leaders and public policymakers. And so when it looks to disseminate its findings to the world, it does so by talking to mayors and the professional community. And I don't know why. I I didn't have an inclination for doing this for 20 years. One day the bell went off in my head that says, no. Just like economists and business people can give you economic and career advice, just like psychologists will help, and they have outlets to do this, and distill from studies to give you advice on how to organize your life psychologically and pick a better partner and be happier. And there are lots of books now, and maybe that was it. There's just a lot of books now on the psychological happiness. I said, well, it makes perfect sense that someone who works in geography and urbanism and urban planning and cities could give you advice, and not just random advice, fact-based advice based on evidence and trends that could give a person advice on how important it is to pick the right place that fits you to live. So it's not rocket science. I think it was just this quirk that said to me, no, if no one else has done it, well, you should do it. You have the ability to do it. You know the material, you know the field, and why not give it a go? So I think that's how it happened, and it's just been great. I'm just happy I did it.
Your epiphany moment then was to say, why not talk to regular people in terms that aren't, so technical to my field? I'm not talking directly to another scholar of urbanism. I want to talk to someone who maybe hasn't taken a class in that, but they're certainly interested in that topic, as everyone seems to be, because we all have to move somewhere, right?
And, when you meet people, it's all they really want to talk about. If you really push people, they talk more about where they live and where they're looking to live and the kind of places they love and where they were on vacation. They talk about that a lot. So, in fact, it's on people's minds. And maybe with the whole real estate up and down, boom and bust, that brought place into the vocabulary more and more. So I thought, no, it's not just about the real estate boom and bust. It's about how all these dimensions of location affect us. And what we talked about at the outset, place is becoming more important to the economy as a whole. So on the one hand, place is becoming more important in the global economy. Location is more critical than ever. And on the other hand, it's something that makes people happy if they get it right. So, it made sense to me to talk about this. And at times, the book has statistical material and it has maps and data and information. It's not location for dummies. There is and I talk about how my editor said to me, if you're going to give advice to people that's meaningful, you have to earn it, and you have to provide a book which really makes the case for why location and place and where you live is so important to you economically and psychologically and in terms of your happiness. So I tried to do that. So I think people owe it to themselves, though, to think about this, and hopefully, really my goal in writing this book was to make place part of our conversation. So when we have our kids and we sit them down and we say, what's going to be really important to your life is go to a great school and to have a great job and to have a career that you love. And, when we say to them, what's really, really important is find somebody that's your life partner and that you love and that you feel great about and that's your partner, we're also going to tell them about how important it is to think a lot about the place they live. And so I think the book is really aimed at making place and location where you live part of this ongoing conversation we have in America.
I want to get back to this idea, the power of cities and what the premium price of cities is getting you. Like we all know about the $2 million Manhattan two-bedroom apartment, that sort of thing. But what is that price premium buying?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, one of the things the book does is it draws on the work of this great urban real estate economist named Joseph Gierko. He's at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. And he and 2 or 3 other collaborators looked over the past 40 years at real estate markets and showed that there are about 10 real estate markets in the United States. Now, real estate markets go up and down. But San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Boston, and several other markets, greater Seattle actually, those markets he called superstar markets, whose rate of appreciation is 3, 4, 5, 10 times greater than the appreciation of other markets in the rest of the country. So one thing that premium buys you is kind of safety. And right now we know, which is shocking to me, that even in the midst of one of the biggest housing crises, mortgage crises, foreclosure crises in U.S. history, the price of real estate in Manhattan has gone up 33% this year.
Wow.
I was just looking at the data for Miami Beach, which is not one of these superstar markets. It is taking a pummeling in the small 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, but the luxury homes on the water are up and up and up and up. So the point is that whether you're living in a center in the urban core of San Francisco, or whether you're living in an apartment in Manhattan or in Beacon Hill in Boston or Georgetown in Washington, D.C., these superstar markets, because they're small, because they're focused, because they're in the biggest economies in the United States and in some cases in the world, they have a lot of protection. And what I did with a woman named Charlotta Melander, we actually tried to figure out why. What accounts for this price premium? Not only in superstar markets, but what is driving higher real estate prices in the 350-plus metropolitan city regions in the United States. And what we found is it's not just income in those places. It's not just that people make more money or bring more money with them, if they've made their money elsewhere and brought it with them to buy a place. And it's not just that they're more highly educated or even more entrepreneurial. We found that there are 2 really big factors in those places that matter. The first, I call it kind of an amenity premium. And what we use to look at that is the number of actual working artists, painters, designers, musicians in a community. And so what we say is that places that are likely to attract a lot of musicians and artists and designers and other so-called quote-unquote bohemians, there's something in that market that is attracting people who have a very sharp eye for amenity. They're people who are really, really, really oriented at finding an exciting, experiential, beautiful place that stimulates their artistic genius. And then the second thing we do is we say there's another premium. We call it an openness premium. And that places like that are likely to be very good at encouraging entrepreneurship and at enabling people to start businesses and generate wealth, because they're open to very different kinds of people. And what we do there is look at the percentage of people who are gay and lesbian in that kind of community. Put them together, this amenity premium and this openness premium, and alongside income, boy, oh boy, this explains a lot of what's driving real estate markets in the United States. So the point is, it's not just income levels that matter. It's really income plus amenity plus openness. So if you find a place like that, that's a place that has a lot of, amenities, wonderful lifestyle, a lot of working artists and designers and musicians, and a place that's open to all different lifestyles and has diversity, but in particular has a large gay and lesbian population. One can guess, all other things equal, that you found one of these hot spots of the real estate market, and that's a good bet for the future that it'll remain hot.
Tell me what attractive qualities emerge in a place when you get a bunch, and I mean a whole lot, of diverse people together in one place.
Well, I think at bottom, what it really reflects is openness. And, I've thought a lot about this because there's been a lot of people who wanted to argue with me about this. I mean, there's no shortage of homophobes in America and people who want to kind of single out this one finding and say, how could this be? I mean, I've been actually shocked by how one empirical finding, which is based on fact and not fiction, supported by evidence, statistical techniques, that's quite just empirical, that's just obvious how this could generate. And at the same time, while real estate developers love it, and real estate developers are like, yeah, exactly, that's what I'm going to do. So I think what it really reflects is not that gay or lesbian people are actually artists are kind of running the economy. It's not that if you have more gay and lesbian people and more artists, your economy runs better. What I call this is openness, or low barriers to entry, or inclusiveness. That what happens is in a place like that, that's open to gay and lesbian people, or open to artistic people, that kind of place is just open to lots of different kinds of people. And I could make this pretty simple. Take a look at let's take San Francisco Bay Area, for example. A place that we now know as the home of high technology and all things innovative in Intel and Apple and Yahoo and Google and new company formation. Before it had any technology in it, it was a place that artists, writers like John Steinbeck or painters gravitated to, and the Beat generation, ended up there, and Ken Kesey lived in Palo Alto. And then it had this incredible wave of popular culture innovation. The 60s, Jefferson Airplane, the Mamas and the Papas, the Grateful Dead. At the same time, it became this incredible incubator of business and innovation. And also, if you look at it, 30 to 50% of those high-tech startups over the past 10 years are founded by a foreign-born person, an Indian or Chinese or European or other foreign-born person. The point is that all those things go together. That places that are open to different kinds of people, where different kinds of people, some who express themselves in art, some that express themselves in music, some that express themselves in culture, but many who express themselves in technology, in a sense, the geeks kind of cluster not identically where the artists are, but in the same kind of place that's open to an artist or a bohemian is also open to this kind of geeky person, technology person, who is kind of shunned in a more traditional environment. And one of the things I learned, I was just out at Google, and it was really, really interesting. And this really helped me confirm this in my own mind. Well, I asked to see the location of where Google people live. And of course, a lot of them lived in the Silicon Valley. But also a tremendous number of them lived in the urban centers of San Francisco. And even more so, when I went and I gave a book talk at Google New York City, the thing that really shocked me was, one might argue, if they're all technology people, they'd live in the suburbs surrounding New York City, in New Jersey and Connecticut and the New York suburbs, safely ensconced in kind of nerdistans, which is what people call these kinds of places. But no, lo and behold, a huge set fraction of the people, I looked at a Google map, obviously, with the dots, a huge fraction of the people lived in and around Manhattan, and particularly in Brooklyn, in urban centers of Brooklyn. The point is not that urban or Brooklyn or Manhattan or San Francisco are somehow better. The point is that a region that's open to this kind of, talent, people who are come in both genders, all races and ethnicities, all sexual orientations, that's a region that's going to get not only more artists and musicians and gay and lesbian people, also, all other things held equal, it's going to get many, many more of these innovative entrepreneurial types.
Now, we've only got a couple more minutes left on today's show, but there's one thing I wanted to make sure to cover, and this is something I was talking about to Tim Harford, the undercover economist. We were talking about your book and about the idea of, in cities, there are so many weak ties, and there's a large, constant exchange of ideas. And what does that sort of thing, that ideas just move so freely between people and there's chaos introduced into the equation, what does that generate?
Well, first of all, I'm a huge Tim Harford fan, so big shout out to the undercover economist and the logic of life. And I noticed that Tim, and he's so kind to say this, he even put a blog post because he titled the chapter after my article, and kind of the sub-theme of this book, The World is Spiky. So it's interesting, and Tim and I have never physically met, but we've now begun exchanging emails and blog posts. So there you go. Somebody who lives in Toronto, somebody who lives in London. We're both part, in our own ways, of a spiky yet interconnected world. Weak ties really matter. And, there's a great, great, great economic sociologist named Mark Granovetter who figured this out a long time ago. Mark was studying how people find jobs. And what most people would assume is that, you want to find a job, you have to talk to 6 people who are tied into the field, and there are 6 strong ties, and they'll get you a job. He found, no. What matter are these having lots of weak ties. So knowing lots of people who send the word out in their networks and mobilize hundreds upon hundreds of people, and that's how most jobs are found. And so one of the things that goes on in these kind of very open cities, if you will, the ones that are diverse and innovative, is that they don't have a lot of strong ties. And one way of thinking about this, my father, working class Italian American, he had ties to about 14 people in his life. His mom and dad, his brothers and sisters, my mother's brothers and sisters, his in-laws and his siblings. He had one friend. But now people have much fewer strong ties. Our families are mainly stronger, the smaller we move away. But we have many, many, many more weak ties. And I remember meeting this guy in a meeting in Ottawa. And he was an older man. And he said to me the same. He said, his father only had 6 or 7 or 10 strong ties in the small town he grew up with. He said he connects with more people in any single half a day than his father connected with in his entire life. And the point is, when we have to manage many, many more people, when we have to manage many more ties, if you will, those ties are necessarily going to be weaker because we just don't have enough time to allocate to make every one of them a strong tie. So what really powers cities is this concentration of people, but what binds them together is these weak ties. And you see that in everything from a technology center like Silicon Valley to a film and entertainment center like L.A., to an investment banking center like New York, to a music-making center like Nashville. It's the weak ties that really matter. So for people, you want to put yourself in a position where you can really, really leverage and maximize those weak ties, because most of the things in life that are important, whether it's finding a job or starting a company, are going to depend on your ability to mobilize communities and networks of those weak ties.
The book one more time is Who's Your City? How the Creative Economy is Making Where to Live the Most Important Decision of Your Life. Richard Florida, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the program.
Oh, great. And I'd just like to say to listeners out there, if you want a snippet of the book or to look at the maps and graphics and information or have a look at our tool we've built to help you choose a place, the Place Finder, that's all at who'syourcity.com, our website. So you can have a look as you're listening in.
Excellent. who'syourcity.com. Our music is composed by Ben Althouse. Check out his website, Ben Althouse, that's BenAlthouse.com. For more information and our online show archive, visit colinmarshallradio.com.